All right.
Please begin.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us at this panel entitled Maximizing Community. My name is Hang Su. I'm postdoc at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. I had the pleasure of co-moderating the session with my colleague, Dr. Qi Dong, who is a postdoc at the Tufts University. So this is a completely new panel of the ISFS. During the past two symposiums, we have selected 56 fellows. Of them, over 80 of them have already secured a faculty position, including the 3 panelists we have here. We figure it would be really helpful to invite them back and share the valuable experience with the current fellows and strengthen our ISFS community. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our 3 panelists today, Dr. Rina Avina, Xinjin, and Jasmine Nirodi. Dr. Rina Avina is a group leader at San Francisco Chan Zuckerberg Bellhub, a privately funded nonprofit research organization. Dr. Avina received his PhD at Tel Aviv University, a postdoc training at Stanford and UCSF. Currently, his research focuses on the association between ribosomes and human diseases. Dr. Xinjin is an assistant professor at Scripps Research. She received her PhD in biology from Rockefeller University and was a junior fellow at Harvard University. Her research focused on the development and application of novel neurotechnologies to understand brain development and neuronal diseases. Dr. Jasmine Nirodi is an assistant professor at the University of Chicago. She received her PhD in biophysics from UC Berkeley. She was an independent fellow in physics and biology at Rockefeller University and postdoc research fellow of also college at University of Oxford. Her research interest is the physical interaction between organisms and their environment. So for today's panel, first I would like to ask the panelists to introduce their own ISFS experience and how that led to their current position as an early stage investigator. And then we'll be open to the audience questions that you can type in the Q&A box. So Dr. Avina, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you for the introduction. And I have to say that even after all these years of Zoom meetings, I'm still feeling a little weird about speaking into the void. So I hope you're all having a good experience with your symposium. It's a great opportunity for me to talk on this panel. I can start by saying that I wish I had taken better use or made better use of my time as an ISFS fellow. Because as I think you all are experiencing, this year or a few years towards the end of your postdoc tend to be extremely stressful and extremely busy. And it sometimes seems like having more meetings and more engagements is just too much. I can't. I need to finish an experiment. I need to wrap up a paper and so on. But it really is a unique experience, this program, in terms of what it can provide you to prepare you for the next step as an independent researcher. So if there is anything that I would do differently is make sure to attend all the sessions and interact more with the cohort, because that has a lot of power. And we're on a community building panel, so that is a part of your community and you should definitely try to use it.
Great. Dr. Jin, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I completely echo with Renan. And first of all, I want to say congratulations to all the newly minted fellows this year. I know this is a very special time of your career. It's full of possibilities and always terrifying at the same time. And I think that's exactly why this platform and this symposium, but also this entire community can be not just a one-time event, because I sort of start thinking when Renan was speaking about several fellows that I have met via this virtual platform. Later on, we found each other in different conferences or symposiums and foundations. So it's really the beginning that we're planting seeds and meeting people that we were going to collaborate with or running to each other again and again in a very long career. So congratulations, and looking forward to the discussion, but also looking forward to getting to know each of you in the next coming years.
Yeah, I basically am going to just echo what both Renan and Shin said, that I also met with a lot of the Intersections fellows after the virtual symposium, and had the chance to develop collaborations, and in particular, like, a lot of us end up in kind of vaguely the same area. So there are a few of us that have ended up in the Chicago area, and so we have overlaps and we know about each other's work, which maybe we wouldn't necessarily know because we saw each other give these talks. And so that really, the thing for me in particular is that I work in a field that was quite different from the rest of the Intersections fellows in my year, at least. I'm kind of an organismal level biophysicist, and what really helped me is to kind of learn about all of these different areas of research and like really exciting things that other people were thinking about, that I could then see connections to my own work with. And then that like led to a whole line of inquiry that like I wouldn't have thought about otherwise.
Oh, that's great. Well, can you give a kind of introduction, like how this ISFS fellow kind of lead you to your current position? Dr. Xin, you want to start?
So I think job market is a very complex process, and we can talk about it and break it down later. And I think sort of this symposium and this community was sort of entering my life in a very special time when I thought I know what I was doing, writing research statement, but not really, right? Like I feel like we all probably went through the whole process of thinking we want a certain job and even sign a certain job that we thought it was X and being Y and Z. So it's a lot of learning process from searching, from identifying what research direction we want to go to, what is feasible, what is exciting, but also essentially run a lab and dealing with a lot of the things on daily basis. And I think this is, in retrospect, all sort of somehow foreshadowed when I was in the symposium with ISFS, and I started thinking about, oh, that was what that symposium, that particular person said that sentence, that was about that. So I felt like it was really a lot to unpack as a junior faculty in the first, I was like 2, 3, whatever many years. People keep telling me you feel like forever junior faculty until much later. But I would say the timeliness of the symposium and community is very important. And of course, it's not a single factor that land us a particular job or get us a particular direction, particular grant. It's not a single factor, but it is really the people that we met, and we started thinking about certain things that we probably didn't know even exist. It's a very nebulous answer. I wish I had a simpler one, but yeah, I'm curious to hear from the other two speakers as well.
Yeah, I think kind of more or less. I mean, the thing about the job market is even after you've gone through it, it's still pretty opaque. Like I still don't really know what happened. But I definitely think one thing that kind of intersections fellows and other programs, right, like it, right, there are several of these types of fellows programs. The thing that it did was it allowed me to like talk about my research in a forum where lots of people heard it. And I can't, again, concretely, it's very hard to say, like, who heard my talk here and then said, oh, let's hear the full talk or something. I don't know if that happened, but I hope it did, and certainly it didn't hurt. Like, certainly people knew about my research a little bit more than they would have if I hadn't given this. And so I think just kind of that definitely was massively helpful. Whether or not it helped with the particular job that I ended up taking, I have no clue what helped with what. I can like talk more about like what I did, but like I don't know what worked and what didn't. And I think at every place it was probably different, that like this helped at this place, but somebody found it off-putting at another place. It's very, very nebulous is the right word.
Yeah, I agree. The process, it seems almost random at times, because you're not really privy to the discussions behind the scenes, the hiring committee, the department, and so on. For me, I think there were two main advantages. The first had to do with how diverse the group of fellows is in terms of disciplines, right? Because I was very much used to talking to people in my field and going to conferences in my field. But having to present my research to this group made me do the extra work to try to digest the science and the future directions in a way that could be well received by a broad audience. So I think having to do that earlier rather than later was very beneficial in crafting my research statement and my future goals. The second part that was very valuable has to do with just how isolating this transition can be. So the transition from a postdoc where you have your colleagues, you have your grad students, you know the people, you're well established, you then transition to something completely new. And it's not just a new institute and learning a new culture. It's also, you get nothing, right? You need to start building from scratch. And you are no longer perceived as a peer to the postdocs and the grad students and undergrads. So suddenly I'm being called Dr. Aviner, and it is very weird, and it creates a distance. And so this is where having a strong, diverse community comes into play, because you don't want to go through this alone. I think we all, to a certain extent, have a tendency to suffer from imposter syndrome. And if we don't have other people who can jump in and say, oh yeah, I'm experiencing exactly the same difficulties, or my struggles are similar, we just don't know. We don't know if we're doing things right. Am I on the right track? So having that community early on, establishing some relationships and some rapport, that allows you to talk freely about your struggle and ask questions. What would you do? Do you have any advice for me? And so on.
Yeah, Dr. Vina, actually following what you just said, I'm curious about this kind of transition for all the panelists. The last minute you are still a fellow, and then the next minute you become an independent investigator. How did this transition you kind of feel? You feel both kind of mentally and kind of professionally. How did that transition work for you?
It's like I started my position in January, and I don't think I've like fully made the transition yet. So like check back in a year or so, I hope. But I mean, I think the largest thing is that I think and perhaps like I was incredibly naive with respect to this, but as grad students, as postdocs, we're trained to be researchers, right? So we do a lot of experiments, we do a lot of analysis, we do a lot of writing, and then all of a sudden you get this empty lab, and we're supposed to like be hiring managers and balance budgets and understand a bunch of stuff about equipment that I'd never really thought about, because the -80 just was in the lab when I showed up, and I'd never had to pick my own, and I didn't know anything about the specs of like the particular like cooling the systems. And so there were all these things which I had never ever thought about or really been trained to do, that all of a sudden now I was doing. And then I have to think about, now I have students and I have a postdoc, and I have to think about what it means to, mentor each one of them in the way that benefits them the most. And I have to think about like money management, and all of these things were never something that I did as a postdoc. And then kind of the one of the things in this transition is like, now you're responsible for this thing, and there's no onboarding, right? Like at least at U Chicago, like there isn't really any onboarding. You show up, they give you a key, and then you have to talk to the construction people. And like, also, yeah, you're also like an architect, because you have to like, they ask you like, where would you like these outlets to be? And it's like, I don't know, I didn't like think about chord lengths of stuff. And so there's just this very sudden thing where it's like, now you are making these decisions which impact the next 10 15 years of not only your life but your students' lives and your future postdocs' lives, and they have to be made fast, and you have to kind of understand that like you'll do it and it'll be fine, and you should seek out help and like mentorship from people around you. And also I think this is one of the things where get to know your cohort, get to know like us, because the people that went through it the years before, because we can maybe tell you what fridge we got and we liked, and that might help you, because I didn't really have many people to talk to, and I wish I had kind of made better use of my peer community, not just my kind of senior community, because my department is lovely and very helpful, but a little top heavy. So it's hard to get a lot of kind of how to set up your lab advice from people around me, because there's not that many people who just set up a lab.
Yeah, I agree with having to make a lot of decisions. So there's certainly decision fatigue, because I don't think there are a lot of other career trajectories where you start a position and you don't have the skill set because you had never been trained in that particular skill set. And you're kind of expected to learn it on the go by making mistakes, but also don't make mistakes because everything is critical. So it is really, it's a difficult transition, right? It's a difficult transition for everyone, and you should fully expect it to be difficult, and don't be intimidated by it, because everyone has to go through it. And build yourself a support network that can help you through these difficulties. I think perhaps I don't think there's a good way to prepare for this transition, to be honest with you, because if I could talk to my past self and explain what the first year as a junior PI looked like, I don't think I would have believed myself, because it's a lot of surprises, it's a lot of learning, very steep learning curve. A lot of decisions, a lot of new people, new culture. So yeah, give yourself the time and the credit that you will eventually be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's very clear from the other two panelists. I think this job really requires you to be adaptive, because changes will happen no matter how well you prepare, or if you don't prepare at all, it will happen. If you prepare very well, it will still happen. So, and I started my lab about 2 years ago in 2021. And I would have to say, I felt like it just never reached a steady state. Whenever I feel like I got this and something else happened that is again critical, and that's something that I never even heard of or thought about, or had a sort of like intellectual framework to approach it. But it's sort of like one wave after the other. You're never completely offline. It's like, you know, for example, Google is improving all the time, but there's no way being like, okay, I think we're going to take down Google for a month and we're going to make it better and they're going to release, right? So you just have to ride a wave and solve the problem along the way, which make it challenging, but also interesting. And I completely agree with what we heard earlier about forming a more contemporary PI friends cohort, sort of small community. You get wisdom from people who are, 10, 20 years older than you, and it's refreshing, but at the same time the situation is very different, and they probably also forgot how they recruit their first graduate students. So I found it really helpful to reach out to friends within my institute or outside who just got their first R1 2-3 years before me. I can learn all the sort of most updated version of what the things to think about, or sort of mistakes to avoid. Try to gather that network, and some of it could be via your personal friendship, it could be specific to your domain of expertise, but connect with people and really share the things that work and also the things that didn't work. And often I found the latter more helpful, because success is harder to reproduce, but mistake probably share more sort of common causes. So I found that having your own little network, and sometimes just to vent and kind of connect, is very important. The mental health is extremely important in these stages. And I will also say that I found it challenging because it's essentially a lot of management sort of, training, which we were not properly trained for in this job. And even for me nowadays, I still feel like I wasn't sure if I'm setting the right priority, because a lot of things I learned that I can actually just let go. And in the beginning, everything happened in my lab. It's all top emergency and everything is a fire that need to be put off. And I learned there's certain things you can let go a little bit and it resolve itself, and that's okay, right? But you do a lot of that through trials and error, and I think that helped me to be less reactive, and that helped the team to be more resilient. But still, it's a black magic that how do I know I'm setting the right priority? Maybe it's something really important, demands my 100% attention and to attend, or maybe it shouldn't. So I think it's still a very much individualized experience. You will have your own personality. Your people will have their own personality to work with you, around you, and that's sort of the magic of the culture, and the team will emerge. But it's not so much about your top-down control, but you do get to say a lot of things about principles in the lab, and rigors and a lot of that. But I feel like the more I learn is to listen to my people. Make sure you hire the one that passing certain scientific fitness for the lab, but a lot of I learned to really let go to some degree, let the people to have their own say in certain things in hiring and establishing a lab. And I think there was one day I wake up and go to lab and start realizing lab have their own culture, which is something that I was expecting but wasn't really dictating per se. And I think that's a really magical and rewarding feeling when that happened. But yeah, it's an ongoing struggle for sure.
Thank you very much. I think because of the topic of this panel, we will kind of jump between the fellow experience and the new investigator experience. So I have a live question from Krishna. He or she asked, I'm curious what interactions among other ISFS fellows you found most helpful or useful, and on the flip side, what do you wish you had done with your new ISFS network that may have been helpful? Anyone want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So it is a unique opportunity that you have, because you're all roughly around the same stage of your career. So you can give and receive feedback at a level that is not easy to come by otherwise. Because if you look above, so established professors, they might spend like 10 minutes reading your application material and give you some feedback, but your cohort will spend as much time as you need to give you feedback, and that can be extremely valuable. That is also an opportunity for you to start to ask yourself question, what does mentoring look like for me? Because your peers, your colleagues, but you can also be each other's mentors. So peer mentoring is very significant and can be very helpful. And for the second part of the question, I think one thing I regret not doing, because the symposium is such a great exposure, I wish that I had followed up with some people, some of the more senior people I knew had attended the symposium, because this is an opportunity now to start making those links, those relationships that can last for decades. So you presented your research, it's just a tasting menu, right? You've got 15 minutes to present years of work. Follow up with the people you think might be relevant for your field. And that does not necessarily have to be following up for a specific position, but hey, can you give me feedback? Or I want to hear about your specific career trajectory. And in general, I find that most people are receptive to that. So don't be concerned about cold emailing someone to ask to talk.
Yeah, I also wish I had a formal connection. I think I do sort of like run into the mentors as well as the fellows in a more sort of like serendipitous settings. But I think one thing that's important sort of for me to think about during this transition is that when we were postdocs or trainees, a lot of things happen. We kind of just go to a conference and listen to talks. But when you're a faculty, a lot of things can happen in a more sort of intentional way. And this is really the beginning that I think reaching out and cold emailing is something that is helpful for the general trajectory of transitioning, because you're going to reach out for collaboration as a PI because you're responsible for your lab, for the trainees, to forging these collaboration relationships. So that's also something I wish I had done more.
Yeah, I think I'll just to echo this. I don't have much more to add to this. Yeah, I wish I had taken in kind of more advantage, but I think I also like don't really want us to blame ourselves too much for not, because like we were so overwhelmed that year. There was just so much to do, and like we were talking to so many people that like it's very easy to just kind of get in over your head. And if it's between like making one more connection here and preserving your mental health, preserve your mental health. But just also I think one thing that I'm glad to know now is that even if I didn't make the connections during my ISFS year, that this community is always like, it's always there. So if you want to make it later, you can. I reached out to an intersections fellow last week, and we're like having a meeting next week to like chat about possible research collaboration. So like it's never too late. So like don't feel bad if you didn't do it like right now, or you just don't have the mental capacity to do it right now. And I think one thing that I kind of wish I had also taken advantage of more, it's just like kind of a low effort way, is the Slack. Like the Slack doesn't have like that much activity on it all the time, and I wish I had kind of like posed more questions there, because if that's just a community of people who will answer your questions if you have them, and it's a very low commitment way to put your questions out into the world.
Yeah, I can hear kind of stress during this transition and kind of early stage. And as I mentioned, it's also very important to keep your mental health. So how did you manage this, I would say, like work-life balance at this very early stage, if you have that?
Yeah, I I think I think it helped me during that time to like very clearly. So I applied also like in the height of lockdown. So like a lot of my interviews were on Zoom, which like oddly enough, I think kind of helped with work-life balance because I didn't travel for most of them. And so the interview would end and then I would just like go lay down on the couch and like watch something stupid on TV. And that helped because I didn't have to like go back to a strange hotel room and then go out to dinner with like people where I had to be on for another 3 hours. So it was in some ways awful, but in like some ways a little bit easier. Especially because like once you get to the point where, you know, if you have like back-to-back interviews and you have like 2 and like 4 in a row or something, it's awful. And then can be like extremely tiring and you just like don't, you get like, my goal by the end of the cycle was to not be at a position where I like hated my own research because I talked about it so much. And I kind of like just fell short of that. So I like think I made it. But like you will get tired of hearing your self-talk. And you just have to, I think the thing that kept me sane was like remembering that there's like an end to it. And this was like, this will be over at some point and you will like, the interviews will like everything will stop soon.
Yeah. So my year on the job market was the busiest year of my life and the most stressful one. And then came the first year as an independent PI and was like, hold my beer. Because you have to be the one to push back against the burden of tasks and against the stress. You're not going to be able to do all of your tasks. That is just a given. Like the load of tasks that you have in the first year or first couple of years as an independent scientist is unimaginable. So you need to make some decisions to preserve your mental health. Learning to say no, that is a big part of it, right? You're going to get asked to do a lot of things, some service in your institute, perhaps some reviewing, organizing meetings, and so on. Don't say yes to all of it. Say yes, maybe next year, right? So try to stagger these tasks. But definitely learning to say no is an important skill to acquire early on.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is the, you know, the Marie Kondo principle, right? Like only keep the stuff that sparkle joy, only say yes to events or speaking engagement or visits or duties that bring joys, because we do this really because we enjoy science. And sometimes I felt during the job search, as well as later on as a junior faculty, there are moments you're just like, this is so much work, but you have to remind yourself it's important. Mental health is important for many reasons. But for me, I think previously when we were trainee, we were, let's say, doing experiments ourselves. I can be very angry and still do experiments. And I think that's okay for, you know, once or twice. But now we are playing a slightly different role. I think if you're in a sort of, you know, different state, at least for me, if I'm more reactive or I didn't sleep well the night before, that might impact my way of making certain decisions, impact my way of thinking straight while I'm thinking about, you know, grant writing or strategic planning for the lab. That will impact of my way of hiring or speaking to my students, and my energy will influence their energy. So you are in a slightly different role, and I think paying attention to your own mental health, your own state of mind is much more critical. And I also think one thing I learned, which I'm still very bad at, is trying to get a routine. Do something that you enjoy. It could be, you know, exercising, pick up hobbies, and make sure you stick to it. And some kind of routine can always help you to, you know, you can write grant 24/7 because you're so excited about it. But if you have a routine that help you to break your little pattern and take a walk by the beach or do something, you know, spend time with your family, those things are really helpful. Especially the first 2 years, I found myself in retrospect was just like literally working all the time. And I think that happened to many of my colleagues. Having built-in routines and help you to remind yourself, this work is great and science is great, but don't surrender yourself 100% to it. And that's really the sort of the secret of being able to have a sustainable relationship, and that help your people to sense that energy. And I think in the long term, that's a much better way of doing it.
I'll just say one more thing if I can here, which is very much linked to this, is that it was really important for me. I know this is about like building community within like the Intersections Fellows, but it was really important for me to have like a non-academic community. Like it's really, really important for me to have friends that like we're not on the job market, or like we're not faculty, and like and didn't care about hearing me vent about this, because it was nice to like vent about all my problems and like say how stressed I was and all this. But then there was like, it was also nice to just go and like realize that these problems are like not it in the whole world. There are like other things. The world is huge, and lives exist outside of this, and that's good to like once in a while remember. And I like, what really helped me is that I lived in New York when I was doing it, and I would just like go for a really long walk sometimes, and even if I wasn't interacting with people, I would just like see a lot of faces, and I would just be like, oh, none of these people care about this. So like, why do I care so much? Like, let me just chill out a little bit.
I think that's a very valuable point in terms of thinking about what is community to you, and try to think about it in the broadest sense possible, because perhaps your current community is mostly your peers, but there's value in establishing connections with people at all levels in your new institute, right? The admins are going to be able to tell you the things that no one else can tell you, and can explain how to work the system. And then perhaps the undergrads can tell you a little bit about the culture and what it's like combining research with their course load. So don't think there's just one type of person that fits under this definition of community. Anyone can be your community. Try to expand it as much as possible, and have a broad community that's very, very supportive.
Great, actually.
Sorry, just one more thing. I just jumping off of something that Ronan said is the admin thing. Like, be best friends with your admins. Like they're honestly like lovely people, most of them, who like everyone I've interacted with. I'm not going to make like broad brush generalizations, but every single admin that I've had has been like a lovely human being, who are just completely like neglected by the rest of the, like nobody interacts with them in the way that like is respectful and like thankful of all the work they're doing behind the scenes. But they're like, if you are nice to them, they will like tell you everything that goes, like things will work for you that you would not have like been able to do in a year, in like a minute.
Yeah, I think we all get the importance of this message. So actually, following the question from Erica, he asked, how do you deal with the hierarchy of faculty? Do you feel like you have an equal amount of say as them? So, do you want to start?
It's an interesting question. So I think it makes our job very interesting, because in the end, we're all running small startup essentially, right? Like you are responsible for your own hiring, your own finance, but at the same time, your lab is not existing in vacuum, right? You exist in this structure. It could be an institute, could be department or center, and you might wear multiple hats, then you have multiple duties, and the relationship with people in the department matter. And I think matter at different degree, depends on your affiliation, depends on your tenure track evaluation, how you are being evaluated, right? So that's a completely separate kind of topic. But if I'm speaking of my personal experience, I think for me, I think some awareness probably happen when you are interviewing for jobs, because your interaction with department, and they're all fantastic scientists and doing amazing work, but you start realizing certain department has certain sets of culture. And it's a little harder maybe to get from Zoom, but in person, when you visit, you can tell. So I think, first of all, when you still have a chance, right? You're still on the market, you're still evaluating, try to get as much information as possible, like try to extrapolate, get all the data point and to draw the line to see what it will be like. That's your dynamics with them. And being that how much you have a say for your, promotion or other stuff and hiring and different institutes work tremendously different. So it's really hard to give you a simple answer, but first thing first, I think it's important that when you sign up the job, hopefully not too much later come as a surprise to you. Good surprise is good, but the other way may not be as pleasant. So I think those things are the stuff that I guess I didn't quite know when I was interviewing. That's the thing I'm looking for, but it's really looking for a different department and what's the sort of the structure and what matters to you, right? And after that, I would say everybody have their own sort of navigation strategy, right? And that's the interesting part of this job. And for me, my department's very small, and we have very senior faculties, and we also have pretty junior faculty. We have about sort of 2 or 3, my department's like 10 people, but 2 or 3, 20% of them are junior, meaning like 2 or 3 years, 4 years in, and that helped me a lot. And we have extremely senior faculties, and my next door is Nobel laureates. So, but we get along really well, scientifically and personally. So I think that was one of the reasons I joined, because I felt it's a place that I can do my science, and I feel supported at the scientific level, but also at a personal level. But obviously everyone will, have your own sort of, challenges and sets of things that you want to navigate. But hopefully you can see a glimpse of that during the interview, and learn how to manage it.
Yeah, I can add to that. If I understood the question correctly, I think conflict is inevitable, because there will be people who are displeased because you got the bigger lab space, or you had some instrument in your startup, or whatever. It doesn't matter. And some of these people are likely going to be more senior than you, because you are going to be the most junior member of your department. So I think as long as you show respect, it's fine to have disagreements. And perhaps the most important thing is to identify who your allies are. That can be in your department or outside of your department, but preferably in your hiring institute. And that is the person who can comment on specific conflicts and can have your back if things do escalate eventually. And like we can't avoid conflict. There will be some of it eventually.
Yeah, I definitely kind of agree with this, and I'm not like 100% sure that I understood the kind of context of the question, but yeah, there's the dynamics in every department in every field are going to be very different. And I guess yeah, one of the things that I want to echo is when you go on your interviews to really just pay attention to vibes. Like, you're not wrong, your gut feelings aren't going to be incorrect, and try to, like, one thing that I tried to do is meet with all the junior faculty in a department, whether or not they were in my field, because they'll like be more honest with you, and sometimes in ways that aren't explicit, but like you'll get a feeling of how their experience has been and how supportive their senior colleagues have been, and that actually like played a huge factor in where I ended up choosing to go. And I will say that, like, truly I have never seen a department more kind of socially functional than mine. Like, there are problems, in terms of administration or whatever, like there are always going to be some issues, like buildings are old, like there's always going to be something, but like I can honestly say that I think everybody in my department is like lovely, and that's rare, I think, and I think like that's the only thing I really cared about when choosing, and I'm happy that I did that.
Great. So we have questions. So ISFS gives fellows a lot of visibility via Twitter. Did that exposure or any other social media engagement help you in your transition? Did you use Twitter or other social media to maximize your community? Anyone want to start?
Yes, I can say. So I did back in like 2020, 2021, like use Twitter a decent amount. Like I used it primarily for whenever I had a paper, I would like write a short like explaining summary of it so that people would read it or read my preprint, or like I would have some nice video that I took and I would be like, oh, look at this fluorescence, it's cool. And then that I think helped people see my research that maybe otherwise wouldn't have seen it. Similar to kind of being part of the symposium. But nowadays it's a bit harder, right? Like I don't really use Twitter that much, or X or whatever it's called nowadays. I don't really use it that much anymore. And there's supposedly like some other place that we're supposed to migrate to, but I don't really use that much either. And it seems much harder to like have these kind of online communities than it was a couple of years ago. But I'm not entirely convinced that that's like super helpful. I think there are a lot of ways to make communities, and you don't necessarily need something so overwhelming like Twitter. And honestly, like I sometimes would find myself scrolling, like during the job market search, I would find myself scrolling through Twitter and like looking at people announcing like where they had accepted and being like, oh my God, I'm so behind. And like it sometimes caused more stress than help. And so I actually don't think it's like super, if you don't feel like being on social media, don't be on social media, it's fine.
But how about LinkedIn? Do you feel like you need to continuously update that?
My LinkedIn still says I'm a grad student, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I completely echo that. I think all these apps and platforms, they are called social media because they're inherently social, right? It's about social connections. And I would say maybe behind all these different platforms or different ways to connect, I do feel I have a different grasps of the work when I know the human who's doing it, right? Like it's just, you read the paper and it's so great, and then you follow their work. But the moment you realize, oh, this is what they look like, oh, this is how tall he or she is, or it just gave you more like a three-dimensional image, and that's just the social aspects of it, nothing related to our professional identity. So I think psychologically there's a reason that somehow we feel more connected with people when there's a social component of it, in addition to work. But I completely agree that it may help, but it's not crucial. It's not essential. If you're an introvert, if you just don't want to support the whole X whatever infrastructure, like I think especially now Twitter has been much quieter in my opinion compared to maybe 2-3 years ago, right? And it would definitely, it probably wouldn't hurt if you use it to sort of recruit, sending out messages when new paper come out, shout out, and I think those are good things to do. But if you don't feel like that's your thing, don't feel FOMO, don't force yourself to do it. Just be yourself and enjoy the process.
Yeah, I'll just add that LinkedIn, in my experience, has been good for two things. First, for hiring, because it helps spread the message, the ad. And the second is I got contacted by not only recruiters as soon as I changed my LinkedIn to my current position, but also by startup companies that invited me to consult for them. So if this is something that you think might be interesting or valuable for you to have more industry contacts, then do keep your LinkedIn profile up to date, because that is what industry uses for the most part.
Maybe I'll update mine.
Great. I think we have a question that you may have covered a little bit before. The question is, what kind of things have you relied on your peer network, especially ISFS fellows or other peers, for help you with your position, kind of getting this new position? Yeah, anyone want to start?
I guess it's everything. And also, not limited to the ISFS community, just general, forming your own community. Like, for example, when I was applying for jobs, I got to read a lot of job application. And because I just don't know what it is, right? Like, is it that we're talking about 3 years, 10 years? How do I write about that? Data, no data. So I feel like there are a lot of principles and sort of things you can read online, but nothing is more assuring to just read a few application. It can be completely outside of your field, but having friends who feel sort of comfortable sharing these materials just give me a sense of the principal components, like they're all different and they all worked, right? And that also happened later when I'm writing all the first couple grants I write. I usually just reach out to people who got it last year, and a lot of them are in this community, the ISFS fellows. That sometimes I also just cold email people saying, hey, this is me, do you feel comfortable sharing? Or you can redact things, I just want to know. So I feel like we do need to remind ourselves that this job is very difficult, but we don't have to reinvent every single wheels. A lot of times you can reach out to help, to get examples, to see how other people do it. It doesn't have to be the way that you do it, but it sets you this sort of like mental orientation about what the expectations are, and make you feel more confident. Part of it is psychological, but part of it is really seeing how other people do it. So I'll say throughout the process doesn't stop at the job search phase.
Yeah, so I think there's a big component of the unknown unknowns from the Johari window when it comes to the transition to an independent position. You may not know the questions to ask, right? You will start by applying or writing your application material, and the more you move through the pipeline, the more you understand what are the relevant questions to ask. And I think there aren't any like right or wrong questions or right or wrong asks. You have this community, use it for whatever you think would be beneficial for you, right? Ask for help, learn how to ask for help. That is also very, very important. And this community is not only supportive, but can also introduce you to the broader network that it shares. So whatever it is that you feel like you need help with right now or in the future, use your community.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think one of the things that Shin mentioned, which I'll echo, is like it really helped to see what other people were doing. So like, it helped them if I commented on their statements or whatever, but I also got help from reading other people's statements and having them read mine in both directions, because I got an idea of different ways to do this, because a lot of times these are really amorphous, right? Like when you write a grant, there'll be like a very clear structure of like, you have to write this section and then this section and this section, whereas like research statements are more just like write for 6 pages, like write for like 2 to 6 pages about anything you want, no restrictions. And that's rough. And like I've seen, many people do it in many, many different ways, and they look really, really different sometimes. And you get lots of like cool ideas of like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could like, do this with my figure organization or something.
Yeah, actually a very follow-up of that question from Kay. He asked, when first starting as a faculty, how much time did you allocate in building your community? Like, for example, conferences, social events, networking, how do you kind of allocate your time?
Yeah, I would love to answer that question, because I asked that exact question to many people. And I was like, hiring, doing experiment with your student, writing grants, going out and, connect with the community. What do you do? And they just look at me being like, you do it all. But I will add though, you don't do it all at the same time, although they are all important, but you can decide a temporal pace, and everyone will make their own choice, right? So for me, I started, and I think the first thing I was really sort of focusing on was recruiting technicians / students, because when you have the student, you can really train, my first generation. I call them the original 4 because I hire 4 students, but I train each of them to do for example, one particular thing, then they train each other, then they become a little bit, independent, and then we have some data, then we can write grants, and then I feel like, oh, I have grants, I have something that's more like a story, I can mingle that with my postdoc work, then I can go out to give talks, then I come back because I give talks, I have more people sending CV, then I can recruit, and I recruit, I can train, I can recruit. So for me, I just sort of go as a circle, but it's really hard to evaluate on a daily basis. What do you do? And I think the brutal real answer is you do have to do it all, but you can decide to do it at your own order and pace.
Yeah, totally. And I think, sorry, I think I like lucked out a little bit because I chose the same order that Chin did, where I had like I recruited students first, and my first student turned out to be like not only a fantastic scientist, but like the best social manager I could have asked for. So she has like handled all of the like networking I could possibly have done. She like organized an open house for our lab where like she just put up signs all over the building, and then people just came by and stopped and chatted with me. It was great. So I like feel like if you can manage to like offload some of this to other people, it accidentally or on purpose, do it.
I think it's extremely individual, depending on your needs. And this is an opportunity for you to say, oh, I enjoy conferences more than I enjoy something else, then do that. I have a colleague who spent her first year as a PI traveling to conferences because that was her best way to recruit people from relevant fields. So, there are advantages to each strategy. You can't do everything, but you need to do everything. So it's about prioritizing, and you can prioritize it for yourself. That's one of the benefits of having this kind of autonomy.
Great, thank you so much. Actually, one last question, if you can give the fellow or the whole symposium a quick suggestion to either the fellow or the symposium as a whole to improve, to help us, what would that be?
Talk to each other more, I guess. But again, like I want to say, yeah, like interact with each other more and like interact with the Slack more. That's always great. But like also you're talking to a lot of people, so if like it doesn't work out that way, it's fine. But I think one of the things that could be great is like now, like we're still, I think like we're all still on the Slack, at least I am, but like I should use it more. So now like we can make use of this smaller community to like talk to each other more now, and I think that would be great to do at whatever time you feel you have the capacity to do so.
I would say just enjoyed it. You made it so far. and even from the beginning, we chose this career because we enjoy doing it. And sometimes when, things become overwhelming, become challenging, we, at least for me, typically forgot why I'm here, why am I doing all these paperwork. So whatever you can do to make you sort of remind your original love for this entire career in industry, try to do that because that's important.
Yeah, I'll echo what Jasmine said. Communication, be open, be vulnerable, talk about your challenges, talk about your struggles. You'll realize that many other people share the same struggles, and it helps. It helps to know that you're not alone in this, and that you are likely to succeed despite all the challenges.
Thank you so much. I will ask Qi-Wen to help me conclude this session.
All right, so it looks like we're about out of time of this discussion. Thank you all to our panelists again for giving them time and sharing with us today. So we'll take a short break, but please come back at 4:45 ET for our last session of Symposium, the Fellow Science session. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.